We had to unload the trailer every week, so Dave would come here early. He manhandled this whole operation by himself for how many years, Dave? 12 years or something like that, maybe more. But when we said goodbye to Dave, what we did, we cut his face and put a Superman suit. If you remember that. He can leap tall buildings in a single bound as well. Don't shoot bullets at him. I'm not sure if... Anyway, okay, Mike. He goes on. Let's pick it up in verse 12. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love is no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I call you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I've made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. This is my command. Love each other. Jesus says then, remain in my love. I can't ask you to remain in that seat, can I? Remain in that seat. That doesn't make any sense. Why? Because you can't remain in a place that you're not sitting in now. I can tell you to remain in your seat. I can't tell you to remain in that seat. And when Jesus says, remain in my love, in the same way, he can't tell them to remain in a place that they have not occupied. What was my point? He tells them to remain in his love because that's where he has located them. Does that make sense? He says, remain in my love because that's where he has led them to be in the first place. He has introduced them to the love of the Father and expressed it on the Father's behalf and on his own behalf. That's why he says, as the Father has loved me, I have loved you. And it's like he exists within the circle of the Father's love, and what his intent was is to draw them into that circle and then stay there. Stay there. He had drawn them into the circle of love that he and the Father have. He has expanded his arms, drawn them in, and folded them and say, I want you to stay here. And they know that he is going to leave. Again, he's a dead man walking and talking. But what he's telling them is, you don't need to leave my love. I'm going to leave, but my love will stay. He's drawn them into, again, that circle. The command can only have substance if they know that he loves them. And again, he said, remain in my love. If he doesn't love them, this command falls flat. The call to obedience, if you obey my commands, you will remain in my love. If they really don't think he loves them, the command falls flat. It has no substance. But the fact is that they knew that Jesus loved them, and when he says he wants their joy to be with him and their joy to be complete, they buy it. And when he gives them the opportunity to remain in his love, that's motivating. You know why? Because they experienced his love in the first place. And when he says, remain in my love, they say, yeah, I do want to stay here, because they did know that he loved them. They would take the command to obedience seriously in order to remain in his love. It really tells us a lot. Again, they had the benefit of a first-hand experience. So if you put your finger on the pulse of, hey, geez, what was it like to walk with him? I know we get to read it, but black and white doesn't give us visual images sometimes. And so if we ask them, you know what they would say? He really loved us. How'd you know? We just know. The way he looked at us. What he did for us. How he interacted with us. And when he said, remain in my love, we wanted that. And they knew that he regarded them. They knew that he had their back. They would do whatever he says in order to stay connected to him. Again, I don't want to just jump over that. We think, oh, God loves us, and we believe that to some degree or another, but I want you to get the substance and the depth. What Jesus is saying is, okay, here's the deal. I've drawn you into this circle. Do you want to stay there? Yeah, I want to stay in this love. I've never experienced anything like it. I know that you're God and you love me. And he says, okay, obey my commands, and you remain in the circle. Okay, great. And it's motivating to them. It says that they didn't choose him, but he chose them and appointed them to bear fruit. By remaining in his love, then, they would bear this fruit. That's what we've looked. What is a Christian? We said a couple words that go along with becoming a Christian. One is receive. And there's a place in John 1 where it says, as many as received him. But receiving him, they received him as a rabbi. Receive is not a great word for becoming a Christian. If you want a better word, remain is. That's where this word is found a number of times. And what he's saying is, I've drawn you in, remain in my love. And so, relative to bearing fruit, well, we remain. That's our part. We remain. We remain in him. We remain in his love. He is drawn in a circle of love, and we make sure we remain there. That's why this morning we'll look at, okay, what are remaining influences and what are removing influences? What are those influences that will cause us not to be able to stay in the circle? We'll find ourselves outside of the circle. Let's identify those influences, because the deal is we want to stay here. Why do we want to stay here? Because if we remain, he removes. And he removes those things that stand in the way of our reproducing the kind of things he wants to reproduce. And you can turn that one of two ways. Impact, yeah. Revealing himself to you and through you, impacting others, impacting your life, changing the way you live, yeah, that works too. Okay, so do you want to be the person Jesus wants you to be? Would you like to be that person? This is not rocket science. There's a circle that he's drawn, and he wants to draw you into it. It's a circle where you understand that you're loved. As you make your way into this circle, he will draw you in. What he says is, good, stay there. But I think that I can go faster. Stay there. But I'm not being who you... Stay there. Remain. Because if you remain, he will remove. And as you remain in his love, he'll remove those things that get in the way of impact and influence and behavior. And what will happen is we reproduce. We remain, he removes, we reproduce. That's the way it works. We remain in his word and we remain in his love. Those things we'll find connect. Remaining in his word is remaining in his love. It tells us what his word focused on, doesn't it? It says, as the Father has loved me, I have loved you. He revealed the Father to them. And he wants them to remain in that. How do we know when we've remained in Jesus' love? How do we know that when we've remained in Jesus' love and that he's changing us? What he says here, he gives us an indication. And in John, he's talked very clearly about it. By this, all men know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. So, here's how to know that you're remaining. If there is an increasing capacity to both experience his love and to reflect it to others. That's it. I've heard somebody say, our love for others is an echo of his love for us. You know the way an echo works. It is something that's received and sent out. Your love for others is an echo of God's love for you. If it's not going out to others, what's the problem? Maybe you didn't know you needed to stay. And somebody drew you into this place where, well, God doesn't really love you. He'll love you more, and you end up getting pulled out of the circle. And now you wonder why I'm so angry. Well, all of us deal with issues, but your capacity to love is not growing. It's shrinking. You know what the deal is? You didn't stay in the circle. Remain. He removes, you reproduce. You reproduce love. And that seems to be the way this whole thing works. How can we tell? Love for others, there's an enduring capacity to love, to serve others. That's what happens when you remain. You're saying, Mike, it's not there. You know what? You keep remaining. Keep remaining. I think sometimes we want to fast forward something Why? Remember that Ananias and Sapphira is a story in the Bible about Barnabas had walked with Jesus a long time. He was a guy who had some means, and what he did, he sold land, and he put the proceeds at the feet of the apostles. And apparently they changed his name from his name to Barnabas, son of encouragement. And so imagine what happened. So there's a meeting, and he takes the proceeds of the land, and he says, you know what, I know I'm covered eternally, and I think some other people could use this because being a Christian in Jerusalem at the time was against the law. And so you were cut off from all kinds of welfare stuff, and so they were impoverished. And he says, you know what, I had land, I'm not going to need it where I'm going. You never seen a funeral with a hearse with a trailer behind it. He says, I'm covered. Here, take this and use it for whoever needs it. Ananias and Sapphira are standing there, and they're looking at this thing and checking it out, and they're going, oh, geez, you see that? He gave the land, and you see the way they're looking at it, they gave him a different name. So, boy, that'd be cool, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be great? And they hatch a plot. And Ananias says, hey, I'll tell you what, let's take our land and sell it. And let's take part of the proceeds and pocket it. And let's lay the rest at the apostles' feet. Maybe they'll give us a different name. Everybody will look at us like they look at Barnabas. And Sapphira agreed with it, so they did that. And so he brings the money and tries to look humble. Well, I had land, and here it is. Here's the money. And Peter said, why are you lying? Did anybody tell you had to sell the land? Wasn't it yours? Why are you lying to the Holy Spirit and to us? And Ananias dropped dead. Sapphira came in as well. You know what? If Ananias had come and said, look, man, you know what? I saw what Barnabas did, and I'd really like to be him. Fact is, my heart's not big enough. I can't take the security that land affords, and I just can't do it. I can't find it in me. You know what would have happened? Peter would have said, that's okay. You hang around. Barnabas has been at this a lot longer than you have. You hang in there. God will increase your heart. Sometimes we want to go from this point of spiritual development to that point. Why? Why? Will God love you any more if you know more about the Bible? The answer is, you might understand it more, but you won't be loved anymore. Do you understand the difference? His love for you will be the same. Your understanding of His love will ratchet up. So there's a reason why you want to remain, but it's not so that God's going to love you more. If you give more, He's not going to love you more. If you're more devoted, He's not going to love you more. So it's not about earning or buying more love. Sometimes we want to go from here to there. Why? Why? Do you understand what I'm asking? Well, so people will see me as more spiritual. I get that, but what we'll find is that playing to the gaze of people and playing to the gaze of God aren't the same thing. There are things that will draw the applause of people. Oh, wonderful. Way to go. But if you look up to heaven, there's silence. The applause of heaven doesn't come the same way that the applause of the crowd does. Because God's not impressed with show. You don't need to prove anything to Him. He knows you. You know what He wants you to do? What does He want you to do? Jesus said it. Remain. Remain in His Word. Remain in His love. Because if you do, He'll remove and you'll reproduce. That's the way it works. How do we know when we've been removed from Jesus' love? I don't think you can tell it right away. Again, a tree. Well, I told you about my tree. Well, it used to be a tree. Dave Breifogel tutored me, gave me a brief lesson about pruning. And this is not on him. This is on me. He gave me this thing to read. Did I read it? I'm a guy. I know where it is. We'll find it eventually. Don't ask directions. Well, anyways, I didn't read the fine print. So it said anything that goes straight up in the air, I cut off. And David said, well, if you look, not the central leader of the tree, the heart of the tree, the center part, goes straight up, and you're not supposed to cut that back. I'll tell you what, when you cut that back, the tree doesn't look real good. Just between you and I, so if you're pruning the tree, the central leader, you might want to leave that alone. It was pretty clear. But with us, when you don't remain in His love, it's not that obvious. We'll talk about how to know. Let's talk about some removing influences. How do we know when we're moving away? There's a couple things. One is the fear of God. And I'm using this because it talks about the fear of God in the Bible, and I'm using this as an influence that I'm not all that hot about. It says the fear of God 22 times in the Bible, and 21 times are in the Old Testament. Now, are we supposed to be afraid of God? No. No. Fear of God, respect Him, yes. Defer, yes. Listen, yes. My will be done, thy will be done, yes. No. No. And we'll talk about that. God is love. Well, let's look at the verse. 1 John 4, 16 through 18. That's what it says. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in him. In this way, love is made complete among us, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. Because in this world, we are like Him. That's what I like about that song. That's the song that we had during the offertory. This is what it says. In this world, we are like Him. We reflect His face. That's what's supposed to happen. Love, we reflect His face out. It says there is no fear in love. That's a big statement. I talk about that a lot. But to me, it's one of those things. This is a very deep, very profound sentence. There is no fear in love. You chew on that a while, and it'll be one of those things that, wow, that is something, isn't it? Fear and love displace each other. If you look around in love, you won't find fear there. So when God puts His love in you, and to the degree you know you're loved, I should be able to poke in through your love, and I'm not going to find much fear there. There's no fear in love. It says, but perfect love drives out fear. That's another statement. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. I talk to a lot of people who are afraid. And when I tell them that the Bible has 5 words, and the last 3 are drives out fear, what do you imagine the first 2 are? Well, what do you use to drive out fear? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? We all fear things. What do you do to try not to get afraid? We have a bunch of things that we do. Some of us, we keep our head filled with noise. We don't stop working. We're never quiet. Some of us, we're addicted to mood-altering substances and experiences. Alcohol doesn't drive out fear. Neither does workaholism. Neither does any kind of addiction. You know what drives out fear? Well, here's the answer. What drives out fear? One thing with the power to drive out fear. And it's not the love of a husband or a wife. It's not the love of a mother or father. It's not the love of a child. It's perfect love. And your husband doesn't love you perfectly. Neither does your wife. Neither does your mother. Neither does your father. The mother's love probably is as close as you'll ever get. But perfect love drives out fear. And there's only one place to find that. When God is accurately represented, you can know that you're loved perfectly. And as your ability to know you're loved perfectly increases, what's going to decrease? It's like a seesaw. As your understanding of God's love increases, tell me what's going to happen with the level of your fear. It's going to fall. Okay, say your fear is high. You're afraid. You try to push down your fear. We try to do that, don't we? You know what makes more sense? This is where you are, fear high, love low. Why don't you do this? Why don't you focus on His love? You know what's going to happen? What's going to happen? See what's happening? As our understanding of love rises, fear falls. So fear gets high, no problem. Look back over here. How can you keep things in check? You're going to get afraid. My advice is, remember those 5 words. Remember 5 words? Perfect love drives out fear. Perfect love drives out fear. Remain. Remain in His Word. Remain in His love. Mike, I'm a really afraid person. Yeah, I got that. I'm afraid of things. I guess we're supposed to remain. We remain, He removes, we reproduce. Jesus presented a picture of the Father that was strikingly different. He completely reframes thoughts about God. And I've told you this a bunch of times. There is no prayer in Judaism that ever, and again, the thing that strikes me is that never, it's a never thing. You cannot find one prayer in Judaism prior to Jesus where God was called Father. Not one. Not one. He never was seen as that. Jesus comes, and that's the way He referred to God as Father. And once Jesus came, you can never put God back into the same box. You know what we try to do? We try to take an Old Testament, New Testament image of God and try to plaster them together. Jesus clarified what the Father is like. If the Old Testament was an analog image, the New Testament is digital. It's what He's actually like. And when you look at it, and so with Jesus, we can never really look at God the way we looked at Him when there was just the Old Testament. This is a bad illustration. But I was thinking about it. I said, well, it's like Darth Vader. Okay, yeah, great, my God, Darth Vader. This is going to be great. I'm really going to look forward to this one. You know, when he said, Luke, I am your father. You know, you're like, well, that's a bad imitation too. But, you know, you really can never look at him the same way. Oh, he's Luke Skywalker's father. You know, and so he's, you know, and that, it changes the way you look at him. And with God, the same thing. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to try to patch that illustration up. Just kind of let that fall like it fell. You can't be afraid of God and love Him at the same time. Boink. There's no fear in love. You can't love God and be afraid of Him at the same time. You can't be afraid of God and know His love at the same time because there's no fear in love. You say, Mike, time out. I'm afraid of God. I get that. What do you think we should do about that? Let's remain. And He removes things about Him that we believe that cause us to be afraid of Him, and we'll reproduce. Because what does He want us to reproduce? Love. He wants us to love self, others, serve others. How that's going to happen? Love is an echo. Fear drowns out love. Perfect love drives out fear. And I think that's the way it works. Fear is, you know, we're afraid that if we focus on love, we won't be motivated to obey. I mean, what if this is difficult? Well, gee, you really can't do too much with this love stuff because after all, we need a good dose of what? Fear? We really need that? We really need to be afraid of God in order to obey Him? That's not what this verse is saying. And but sometimes that's a default setting. We think we need to have the threat of punishment over our head in order to motivate us to obey. That's not what He says. In fact, Jesus is challenging that. He's saying, this circle here, where is love, stay. He said, this is the circle I'm drawing you in. I've told you to call God Father. Remain in me. But really, will there be the motivation? Will I change? Jesus says, if you remain, God will remove and you will reproduce. You will be the person He wants you to be. Sometimes we don't trust that His love is strong enough. We think that we need the threat of punishment. Otherwise, there's no motivation to change. And I get that argument. But Jesus is countering that. You feel that? Do you understand what I'm saying? Love doesn't feel very substantial sometimes. It feels like, I've got issues that love aren't going to deal with. No, you don't. No, you don't. You have no issues that love can't deal with. You say, but love, perfect love. Perfect love drives out fear. You don't need to be more afraid of God. You need to be less afraid of Him. You can't tell fruit right away. You know, there's a guy who went to a Get Spiritual Quick seminar. You know, they're all over the place. You know, you can go from here to there in light years. You know, so it's like you can become a spiritual giant overnight. And so he went to this thing, and I knew it was going to happen. And I tried to tell him a little bit. And what he did, he fast-forwarded, but then it was a setup because he couldn't keep it in place. You know what ended up happening? He ended up looking down on other people that weren't quite as spiritual as he was. I'll tell you what. Devotion that leads to division is not divine. I'll say that again, a bunch of D's. Devotion that results in division is not divine. A devotion that leads somebody to very carefully look at their life and get away from me, I'm being spiritual. Shut up. Just shut. Oh, okay, I'm spiritual. Don't. That's not Jesus. I know this guy might be devoted, and he might be reading the Bible a bunch, and he might be giving a bunch away. And he might even be seeing miracles, and he might have a bunch of answers to prayer. But if this guy is not loving, that's not Jesus. Devotion that leads to division is not divine. How can you tell? Sometimes you just have to wait. Because the kind of devotion that Jesus will fuel will give you an ability to be gentle with yourself and with others. Because He wants you to love yourself and others. And sometimes there's a drivenness to... Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? Sometimes there's a drivenness to spirituality that feels... It doesn't feel quiet or peaceful or light at all. And that's what Jesus' stuff feels like. The world is another source of influence. Look what it says. Don't love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, the boasting of what he has and does comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world has a crowding effect. It says, look what it says. Again, there's another. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Let's let that one land. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So, you can either experience the love of the world, or you can experience the love of the Father, but those two will pull you in different directions. The world is not directly antagonistic to the love of God then. It does what a virus does to a computer. It overloads the circuits. The world keeps us so busy that God's I love you feels like it's really quiet. It just can't be heard above the hubbub. Now, I guess maybe gratefully, it all depends who you talk to. My world is very placid. I can hardly hear anything. So my life is always quiet. I just pop out my hearing aid and everything just set. I could be at McDonald's and everybody's just shouting. Marcia says, how can you stand it? No, it's not that loud at all. It can be that way inside our heads. Inside my head is pretty loud, and I don't need hearing aids. My hearing is really good inside. God's voice gets drowned out by what? The world worries, riches, pleasures. It says they choke the word so that it becomes unfruitful. It's not that they shoot it, it's that they just overrun it. It's this little thing. God's voice is, I love you. And it's like, get this, do this, yes, no. You know, and it's like God's voice becomes hard to hear. Conquest via overload. The world encourages us to possess and to parade. And just here's the way it works. So I see something that I want. Hey, there's a nifty watch. See, if this watch wasn't mine, it is mine. And I had it like a week, and I scratched the face so that it's almost, you can't see it. Okay. Anyways, you didn't need to know that. I don't know. So anyways, here's a watch. And let's say this had a really good crystal, not a scratched up one. So, I really want that watch. I'll do things to possess the watch. So that's called lusting. Lusting is not just sexual. It's craving. Look at my watch. I want this watch. Now when you possess, what do you do then? Look at my watch. I'm parading it. You know what I'm parading my watch for? Why am I doing this? If I've got a cool watch, what are you going to do when you look at the watch? Your face is going to light up. That's a cool watch. And you know what's going to happen? I'll feel better about myself when I see the light of your face. Why do we possess? We possess so that we can parade, so that we can live in the praise of people. Hear what happened at my work? And again, encouragement, that's fine. But it seems like we can live for the applause of the world or the applause of Jesus, but they're not going to applaud at the same time. And that's what he says. The world encourages us to possess and parade. It has a choking influence. Someone who is bent on getting what they want will not be able to know God's love deeply. We can live in the light of His face, or we can live in the light of one another's face, the face of the world. And you're saying, okay, you're concerned because we're caught by the influence of the world. What can you do? What are you going to do about this? If you can't experience God's love, if you really are in the gravitational pull of the world, what are you going to do? Anybody got an idea? Remember that circle over there? Here's an amazing thing. Remain. And He'll remove. And you'll reproduce. That's what it says in Hebrews 13:5. Let your lives be free from the love of money and be content with what you have. This will be good. What's he going to say about that? Because never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. What can man do to me? Do you understand what it's saying? At some point, the need to possess and parade shrinks as His love makes us less afraid. This is where it happens, folks. Remain, He removes, and we reproduce. Quickly, remaining influences the love of God. We saw this. Jesus' influence is gentle, not forceful. It is light, not heavy. Jesus changes the way we look at God, and the way Jesus reflects Him is accurate. Jesus is not forceful. Now, at one point, those who spoke for God were forceful. Elisha, John. But when Jesus came, He said He's gentle and humble in heart, and that's what God is like. And what we said then last time, and again, don't blow people up, but if somebody's railing, forceful, and claiming this is what God says, I got a letter from this minister who felt obligated to say these things, and it was just a scathing letter of judgment. And he says, God is giving you this message. No, He isn't. That wasn't from God at all. Why? How do you know? Because Jesus is gentle, not forceful. He says, my yoke is, well, what did He say? Come to me, you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. He's saying it clear. And my yoke is easy, my burden is light. When you get a Jesus thing, it doesn't feel like this. It doesn't, because this is not a heavy place. Being in the love of God is not being in a heavy place. It's being in a light place. It's a place where you feel regarded. It's a place of gentleness. And it's a place where you're changed. And that's why He says, remain. And He'll remove and you'll reproduce. It's hard to believe, though, isn't it? It's hard to believe. We have this tendency to think, oh, that's a nice place. That's a nice place. Nice, little, happy, love of God thoughts. They're not very real, very powerful. You know what this is? This is not a nice place. This is a necessary place. This is not just a good place if you just happen to be having a bad day. What Jesus is going to tell you, straight out, to the degree that you remain in His Word and remain in His love, He will change you. And you'll reproduce. And some of you say, Mike, I'm not changing a bunch. I get that. Maybe we need to spend more time in here and not get pulled away. When somebody claims to speak for God and they are heavy and forceful, say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but that's not what I'm hearing. So don't shoot the guy. But just say, okay, I'm going to stay here. We don't believe love is the answer. We believe that kind of God's love is the result of obedience, don't we? You know what Jesus is saying here? His love isn't the result of obedience. It is the reason for it. Love is the result. Love is the horse, and obedience is the cart. We put the cart before the obedience before God's love. When love is the fuel, love is the horse. It pulls the cart. That's why gaze and glance is so important. The Spirit, we're not going to talk about that much now because Jesus will have a lot more to say in his walk, and we'll get to listen to him. John later on will say this, last verse, we know that we live in Him and He in us because He has given us of His Spirit. We have seen and testified that the Father has sent His Son to be the Savior of the world. If anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God, God lives in Him, He and God, and so we know and rely on the love God has for us. What I want you to see, and again, we're not going to spend much time, the Spirit is talked about in the first verse, knowing God's love in the last verse. That's what the Spirit does. He introduces us into the love of God, and that means that a Spirit-filled believer is one who believes in God's love. This is a Spirit-filled believer. This is one who stays in God's love. That's what it means to be Spirit-filled. How can we do this? I'm going to ask the worship team to come up. There's a sheet. Come on up, worship team, and I'm going to just throw an application at you. We talked about spiritual breathing. If you want to remain in His love, this is a good exercise. I changed some of the wording. What I did, I put be still and put those phrases from God. I am God. I will be exalted in heaven. I will be exalted on earth. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I put those in the first person as I. What I do, and when you be still, when you start off, you don't have what everybody wants. You're afraid. Let your arms drop and think from what I do. I put these in my I am God, and so I imagine and I say them as He has said them. So because it's like He's talking to me. And so that's why I would encourage you, as you put these things through your head, think of it in that way. I am God. And it's as God standing there talking to you and saying, I am God. I will be exalted in heaven and I will be exalted on earth and I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. He's talking to you because He wants you to stay here. And then when you stay there, then the commitments, I changed them that you see me. You sympathize with me. You deal gently with me. And so once you be still, then you speak freely. Exhale your concerns, inhale His commitments. That'll enable you to wait patiently. Here it is. Enable you to love perseveringly. Next week, we'll talk about remember my words. Father, thank you for your regard and for sending Jesus to reflect it clearly, accurately, clearly. And I ask that we would remain in His words and in Him and in His love, the love that you have communicated to us from Him, through Him. I pray that we would remain so that you could remove and then we could reproduce and we could bear your face of love to this world. In Jesus' name, amen.